Click that like and subscribe button and go sign up on superchargedstocks.com and let's keep you notified. Good morning, everyone. It's Andrew with Supercharged Stocks, and today is a very special day for me because I'm able to talk to Dr. Marc Faber, and he needs no introduction, but a little quick background. I mean, Dr. Faber got his degree back, a PhD, in economics back when he was 24 in Zurich, Switzerland, in Geneva. And without going through the entire career, rose up to managing director at Drexel Burnham Lambert in Hong Kong, which really, if I put this into a sports analogy, is kind of like you're reaching the Olympic levels. If you're able to hit the highest level of investment banking and trading and become a managing director, that's serious work and commitment and time and knowledge. He's had no end to success with predicting the future and looking at things. And I would say mostly because of such a firm and strong conviction in understanding history, the past, literature, and using that along with all sorts of other models to guide us forward. Of course, he has his report, which has been running for years now, which is the GLOOM, BOOM, and DOOM report, which I strongly encourage someone to read, because not only are you giving incredible insights into stocks, but more importantly, I see this as the level of education you're going to get because you're pulling out so many incredible writers and philosophers and thinkers to help remind us that a lot of the things that we see as being new or this has never happened before is that, yes, a lot of these events that are happening today have happened before. A lot of these themes have happened before. We're human beings after all. So this is a huge discussion. I wanted to center around commodities and precious metals, but also with the emergence of crypto and just get that whole understanding of where we're at today, this idea of value and where we should be looking for our money and what do you see moving forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Faber, for being here. Looking forward to learning some things.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So, I mean, we've jumped into a big topic, and I always like to start by kind of looking at the job that you're in and a lot of people in is predicting the future to some degree. And I always go back to that photo of the Oracle of Delphi that the Greeks used in order to whimsically conjure up what would happen in the future, or tarot cards or something. And that, of course, at the end of the day, we have fantastically powerful tools. And I highlighted and talked about, but often, and I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the strongest tools, especially in the situation we're in today, would be a firm understanding of history, looking back at big historical events, whether it's in the markets or in politics or anything to that matter, and looking at both sides of those, looking at those critically to see a macro overall picture, which is developing today. For me, that's how I kind of viewed this chaotic world that we're in. And I would wonder if you would say it's the same, that it's very uncertain, very chaotic, hard to predict because of this chaos. What are your thoughts just on that in general? Because it's a big loaded question.
Well, I think in general, we overestimate what we know. Also historically, I mean, who knows exactly why we went to war so often and why we did take these actions that we know very well bring about huge human tragedy to most people, not only to the soldiers who die at the front. And don't forget, nowadays, the generals are not at the front. This is different. Alexander the Great, he was at the front, actually. He fought in each battle right at the front, not at the back, but at the front. And also the Roman leaders, the generals, the consuls, and so forth, they were at the front of their armies very frequently. So, the way wars are being fought is nowadays very different. And the danger is, of course, that when people don't get hurt and when it doesn't hurt their purse, they're very likely to go to war. I mean, in the US, the politicians, they sit comfortably in Washington and they don't care if the American soldiers go and invade a country. They don't care about how many civilians are dying. they always talk about human rights, but when it comes to themselves, there's very little human rights in action.
Yes.
So I think it's when you look at history, most of the battles and wars were completely useless, completely. And I'm just reading it again, a book about Vietnam, how it came to war. I mean, the US was grossly misinformed about the whole Vietnamese situation. Ho Chi Minh originally wasn't a communist at all. He was a nationalist. He wanted
Yes.
the nation Vietnam. And the Americans then interpreted it, whether maybe it was for their convenience, because they knew if they went to war against a country just because it wanted to be a country, the American public would have objected. But if they could put the banner, these are the evil communists that we're fighting, and the communists will invade the whole world, and Vietnam is just one part of the domino, and so forth and so on. So the American or the gullible public, they believe in it. Of course, at the time, the confidence or the trust in the American media was still much higher than it is today. Nowadays, the mainstream media dishes out daily so many lies that the public, even the not very enlightened ones, realize that it's all a lie, that it serves a purpose, and you never know exactly what for they do it, usually for just one reason: power and money.
I mean, today we can see it a bit more clearly. And I want to take a step back because it's so critical. And I love that you mentioned with Alexander the Great in Rome. That's a true illustration of skin in the game. If you're going to go to war, then your leader of your country, then him and his family are going to war then. Like, you're going to war. Like, you're showing up then. You're going on the front lines. And if that's the cost that you're willing to put all of your people in, then senators, guess what? Your sons and daughters are going to war as well. You know, it doesn't matter which side, you're all going to war, and we're going to do this. That would change the face of war very quickly.
And you're going to pay for it.
Yes.
You understand? That is one of the dangers of having free money. In other words, zero interest rates, and the idea of MMT. MMT is basically, who cares how big the deficits are? It doesn't matter. And that, of course, leads to an environment where war is not painful. If you can just press a button and drones fly around the world and commit damage to other nations, and there is always a collateral damage where innocent people die with it. So I think the temptation to go to war is very high because nobody pays for it, and the soldiers get hurt, but the soldiers are in society not important, and the military brass is not at the front line.
There's nothing
the US has something like 600 generals.
Yes.
They all sit somewhere in the US and give speeches to make additional money and so forth.
Yes, the realities of it are rarely shown as well anymore. And you know, once again, if there was more at stake, and let's make this equation to even say for fund managers or hedge funds, if it's not your money and there's nothing at stake, and I can either make bets or this and that, and not only am I encouraged to make these bets, but I'm rewarded with a big bonus, it's a lot easier for me to make decisions if that's the game I'm playing. If I know that we're printing money at incredible rates and I'm in part of that group, then there would be a question of going, well, I don't care, we just print more. Let's just keep printing, fine. But there's nothing in life for free. And I kind of mentioned this earlier on another show, whether it's capitalism or communism, if you want to go whatever extremes, nothing ever comes for free.
Yeah, sure. And especially, the danger of the current monetary policies are that asset prices are elevated. And most of the intelligent fund managers, they know that it doesn't add up. They know that very well. But they're afraid to criticize the Federal Reserve too harshly because their income, their performance fees depend on money printing and assets going up. They don't want assets going down because then the asset value of the fund diminishes and the fees diminish and the performance fees vanish and so forth. So we are in an environment where even if people intellectually know that money printing has disastrous consequences, as I said before, war is one that is more likely to occur when there is no cost than when there is a high cost. The second is, of course, when you can print money endlessly, the government can acquire assets as they do now. They buy bonds and mortgages and so forth. They can then step up and move like the Bank of Japan and acquire, say, stocks through ETFs or maybe even individual stocks. I mean, in the US, we have the plunge protection team. That is not a fairy tale. It exists. And they intervene into the marketplace. And knowing the industries in America, which are oligopolies to a large extent, in other words, a few companies control an industry and they control it through the politicians and with the intermediaries, the lobbies. And so when you have that kind of a system, you can have companies that actually support the government and government interventions, and the government then buys corporations. They can go and buy stocks, or they can one day they will have to bail out the pension fund system. Yeah. So by bailing out the pension funds that they will own, they'll become the largest shareholder overnight. And so the move towards socialism and state control is, of course, much stronger than would be the case if no money would be printed. So let's put it that way. Whatever people think about Milton Friedman, and it's interesting that one of the great thinkers of the last 100 years and one of the great thinkers in economics of all times, I mean, he's comparable to Adam Smith and David Ricardo and Schumpeter and Keynes and so forth. He's a brilliant thinker and he's a brilliant teacher and author. But you hardly see him ever quoted because he argued for small governments and for free markets and for less, not more interventions. And he outlined very clearly that with all its fault, the capitalistic system managed to create in the world a society where the poverty rate is at one of the lowest level ever. And we all talk about wealth inequality. This is true. The wealthiest people control most of the wealth. They have the 1%, they have maybe 80% of the US wealth in their hands. But at the same time, if you go back to the Middle Ages or to the 19th century, the wealthy people, they lived and were eating, of course, different food than the poor people. But nowadays, the wealthy people eat more or less and drink more or less the same as the poor people. I mean, you could find Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Trump drinking a Coca-Cola can. And you can go into a shop and buy exactly the same product. It's not an inferior quality. It isn't a different can. It's the same can as the richest man in the world will drink from. Ditto for a beer. Ditto
Yes.
for a bottle of whiskey or vodka or whatnot. You understand? There are many things that have actually become rather equal.
Yes.
Or nowadays, most households, they have running water. Most. This was different in the past. First, only wealthy people had running water, or they had wealthy people had electricity, and they didn't have just candles and so forth.
Because it's the basic necessities and above have all risen up. I can drive in a Volvo, that's a 1978 beat up Volvo. I'm still going to get there, whether you drive in a Lamborghini or Ferrari. I still have a car. I have a ways and means of getting there because of the structure that has been created. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think that it's a type of cycle that in, say, a democratization and a capitalist, when capital flows so freely to raise up a standard of living, that then there's a complacency almost, that it's then, okay, we've met the necessities, and then it's the desire that, and what could argue we see today is this entitlement that because you have something, I deserve something then. Or we take for granted because things have become a little softer, that we take for granted, say, what comes in the news. Why would I hear this all the time? Why would they lie to us? I take for granted that whatever they tell me that this report is, it must be true. I don't need to go verify or check it. Is there a sense of laziness or complacency that comes whenever that occurs as a part of a cycle?
I think with high standards of living, and we had post Second World War in the US and certainly also in Canada and in Western Europe, we had essentially a very privileged environment where people grew richer because of the industrialization and because of, let's say, strong economic growth that was, until, say, the 1980s, relatively natural. Population growth combined with productivity growth, combined with wage increases, all led to strong economic gains, and people could start to travel and they had money. And the first setback then came with the dollar devaluation in 1971. But basically, we had post Second World War a very spoiled generation, including the boomers, to which I belong. And now you know approximately my age. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning is this, because if you've been to socialist countries the way I've been there in the 60s and 70s, and you've seen Eastern Europe and Russia and China under socialism and communism, believe me, you will never want to have that kind of a system, even for your worst enemy, even for your neighbor. Yes. So you understand, socialism, I can assure you, and this everybody can check statistically, and everybody can also ask their parents who may have been in Eastern Europe or traveled from Eastern Europe. I can tell you GDP per capita in Eastern Europe was much inferior to what it was in West Germany and in Western Europe. And the food quality that people were eating was a disaster. Under a state ownership system, nothing works.
Yes.
Nothing works. And forget about progress.
There's no progress. Yeah.
People have a disincentive to work. They don't want to work. It's like now in the US, they distribute money. And so a lot of people, they don't want to go to back to work because they get more money from the government than from the salaries they would obtain. And that then breeds a very unhealthy population.
Yes.
And don't forget, the world changes every day in terms of technology and new devices and new ways of doing business. Someone who is out of the labor force for 3 years in more demanding jobs has lost out already to people that did the 3 years that continued to work and continued to educate themselves and so forth. So if you've seen the disastrous conditions under which people lived and the lack of freedom they had or had to endure under communism, socialism, it's inconceivable for these people who've seen it, the disaster, to think that some people who would want to introduce that kind of a system. It shows what some people, well, I think it was Hayek or von Mises, observed. If socialists understood economics, they would realize that it's a poor choice.
And I love in your publication, the latest newsletter, you have Brian Douglas from the Mises Institute, who I think he's referencing Belloc's work. He says, "We march towards slavery accompanied by songs of fairness and change."
Yes, exactly.
That's today. That's exactly right now, today.
Yes. But what I'm surprised is that so many large corporations actually support this nonsense. That whereby, Schumpeter, he explained that capitalism would be so successful, and in this phase of great success, of course, inequalities would increase because the people that work hard, the smart people, would move ahead. Like in a horse race, some horses are moving ahead and others stay behind. And so then the people that would have money, they would wish to have some sort of security, and therefore they would want to have maybe some socialist elements in the equations because they already have the money. So with socialism, they may hope to keep some of their privileges because they work closely with the government. And also the socialists would be supported in a capitalistic society by academics, because the academics, of course, they have a good position at universities, but they don't make the money that the tech guys in Silicon Valley make. So they would be kind of amenable to a socialist system.
It's risk and reward. If you're out innovative and you're creating tech, that's the highest risk. You're taking a large gamble. It has the highest reward. If your path is I'm going to be a teacher in a school, that takes a very different mindset. And like you said, it's very amenable to going along, possibly utopian idealism of this kind of and I'll back that up by saying I'm always hesitant about anyone who ever speaks about we need to have things equal or equality as a generalist term, because it's just simply denying biology and general nature and course. There is, what does that even mean to make things equal? Because we're not equal, and there's people who are better at things than others. And shouldn't we celebrate, just as we celebrate an athlete who's outstanding at running, the 100-meter dash, or someone who's absolutely brilliant as an architect? Shouldn't we celebrate the merit and the excellence rather than say, it's unfortunate that architect is such a genius?
Yeah, sure. That I agree 100% with you. What's wrong with having different skill sets? No. In the socialist ideology, you don't want to have school children that are better than others because the others might have some ill feelings and get burdened psychologically for the rest of their lives. You understand?
Yeah, it kind of ignores the resilience of
Crazy.
children. It is crazy.
But-
It's totally insane. It's
but
a project that's been done in countless countries, as you mentioned, time and time again, with utter failure. Yet still,
Complete
we're marching
failures.
along.
But you understand, the people that pronounce this BS, I don't think they believe in it. But they have the mentality, what is good for me is not necessarily applicable for you. And
Yes.
it's all about control and control and control. And in a society such as we have, where you have 1% that actually not even 1% is really seriously rich. It's
No.
more like 0.1%.
Yes.
And so these people are easily attacked by the masses. So these people actually have an interest to dumb down the masses.
Yes.
And actually give them the impression that they do something good for them.
Yes.
But of course, as you know, the Bolsheviks also thought that, but then it backfired very badly, and they got Stalin.
Then it finds out the intelligent ones are immediately executed as well, because we can't have the smart ones running around running things.
Absolutely.
So that can't work.
Everybody got hit.
Yes. And then you have a situation, whether you're looking at Germany with fascism or you're looking at communism, is you have a day-to-day population that is completely bombarded by fear, confusion, and not knowing, am I virtue signaling enough for the cause? Am I doing right? I mean, and we're kind of heading already to that already when you see with restrictions now. I live in Canada, which is very, very restricted, where you have this even talk of saying, maybe we'll allow you to meet with someone 6 feet apart if you're good, say specifically here in North America, in the West where I am, and you have confusion in society, in politics, this upheaval. Is there a translation, and how can we say there's an efficient market, which I wouldn't say we do have an efficient market, but when we have all of this noise and all of this madness being reflected, does that also then equate directly to investment portfolios as well?
You know, I think the world is always confusing. Now with the information flow, it's more obvious to say educated people that it's very complex, and we are overfed with information. However, I just want to point out there is obscurity where the world will be in 5 years' time, and it could be run by a despot, dictator. I think democracy will not survive for long. We didn't have democracy for 5,000 years of human history. They claim, well, democracy is so old because the Athenians had some sort of democracy. But actually, only Athenians could vote, and only men, and only certain Athenians, not all.
Yes.
And also in 19th century in England, the only people that could vote were people that paid tax and a certain minimum of tax.
Yes.
Others couldn't. And as you know, women couldn't vote until, I think, in America, but the 1920s or 1930s, as well as blacks and so forth. In Switzerland, the women couldn't vote until 1973 or so.
73. Yes, yes.
Yeah, but in local elections, in some cantons, it took until 1995 until they could vote. So we are a conservative country.
Yeah.
But the issue is, who will take over from democracy? You know, an evil right-wing person, a fascist, or a left-winger that brings about. The fascist may actually be more favorable for the economy.
Yes.
The socialist, you know, if you look at Biden and his team, I'm not sure they know what they're doing.
I don't think so.
And it has the imprint of Obama all over the policies.
Yeah.
It's probably Obama's third term. And the question is, how long Biden will be in place. But we should expect that politically something will happen in the next 5 to 10 years in the US. My sense is that they will keep on printing money. Yes. I don't think they can go back on that, because once, Reagan and also Milton Friedman before that always said, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. I said day one, when they introduced QE1 in December 2015, I said, this is not QE1, this is QE eternity.
Yeah.
Because once you embark on QEs, which is the purchases of assets by the central bank, once you embark on that policy, it's very difficult to get away from it.
Yes.
They tried under Powell in 2018, 2019, but then, as you remember, already in August 2019, some disruption in the money market, in the repo market took place, and they turned on the spigot again at the end of August 2019, long before there was a coronavirus issue.
Yes. Yes.
So they printed money already before, and since then it's accelerated, and now they talk about tapering. They may be able to taper for a few months, but then the financial markets will be disrupted, and they'll have to go on again and print.
Yes. It's like a Pandora's box. It's like, okay, we can't open this until we have to. Okay, we've opened it.
Yes. But in this environment, I always say you have to be diversified, and property prices are high, as you know, but not in all areas, whereby in the countryside now, over the last 12 months, in small cities in Canada and in the US, prices have gone up a lot, because some couples who live in cities on small space in apartment blocks, they figure out maybe it's better to live in the countryside, and we can do most of our work through the internet. And so there has been a movement, and still is, into living in the countryside and not in cities. But as you know, because of this move into the countryside, the city centers have lost out. In other words, real estate in New York has performed very poorly, and in other major cities like San Francisco, where the vacancy rate is up very strongly. So, because the system is all manipulated and held together by the elite, now the corporations say, well, you must come back and work in the office. Otherwise, the downtown areas are destroyed. So people will be forced to go back to work in an office, or maybe they will choose not to work and live on benefits. Who knows? But there are so many uncertainties that I agree with how the world will look like in 5 years' time. The one thing we can all agree, money printing does not lead to prosperity.
Yes.
It leads to highly distorted markets, and it leads to endless speculation in the one or the other asset. So you have had speculation a few years ago in unicorns, or 2 years ago in unicorns. Now you had speculation in new issues and options and futures, and options on futures and leverage. Then you had speculation in SPACs, SPACs. And over the last few years, massive speculation in cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
Now, I'm a believer that cryptocurrencies are a way of the future and that some will stay and become the standard. But there is also a lot of fraud. You understand? Not every crypto is born the same way with the same qualities as we discussed before. And so you have to be, say, skeptical, and you have to be careful that you don't get stuck with something whose value will go down a lot. And then you have the speculation in stocks, and you had a spectacular boom in all kinds of companies that have no earnings.
Yes.
Where there is the least speculation actually over the last, say, 2 years is in the gold market. There's very little speculation in gold, silver, and platinum. The speculators have all left, and they've gone into, cryptocurrencies and so forth.
I was going to ask you that. It's an interesting narrative that seems to be, I mean, whether it's Michael Saylor or other people, they're trying to push this narrative that crypto or Bitcoin in particular is going to take the $7 trillion wealth from gold and it's going to shift it over to a crypto. Whereas I think, my personal opinion is that's an absurd. There's value in both. There's plenty of free money, like you said, companies that have P ratios out of this world, no revenue. That wealth you could shift into something of value. Why is the narrative have to be it's a gold crypto fight? Shouldn't be. We can live together.
I agree. There's no reason why money should flow out of gold into something else. You actually don't need to have cryptos going up because of money flow shifting. All you need are the idiots at central banks that print the money.
Yes.
As long as you have these idiots in all central banks, and I'm not saying this lightly, these are people who are arrogant and very ignorant of history, or they are just digging their heads in the sand and don't want to take personal responsibility and say, we have a problem, we have to find solutions, and we can't be the solution by printing money.
Yeah.
But that they will never admit.
No.
They actually, I think some of them actually believe in their BS, like Yellen. I think she believes truly that she, who claims, this is what she wrote in an article, that she comes from an intellectual background. Yes, I can believe that. Only academics can be this removed from the reality of the world.
Yes.
And also Powell, he's a weak person. He, in fact, this raises the question, who runs the government? Because the government, the Fed, and the Treasury, already years ago, a former voting member of the Fed told me it's one and the same. They coordinate everything. So then the question arises, there is no Fed independence. They will do whatever the government tells them. And if the deficits are large, then they'll finance these deficits. And if they need money, because financial markets go down, and since they're so big relative to the economy, if they go down, they hurt. So then they will print again money. So they are in a kind of vicious circle that will one day come to an end, but we don't know exactly how. And my concern is that before it comes to an end, the elite will try very vicious things, like the control of population through all kinds of medical measures.
Sure. Yeah, we see it happening already.
Yes. And so I feel comfortable to own some gold. Now, it's not a question that you should buy it today and sell tomorrow. It's not a speculative investment.
Yes.
I regard it as a store of value. There are not many stores of value for the long run. And the danger of gold as a store of value is that your gold may be somewhere else than you live, and you cannot take hold of it.
Yes.
But as you know, in Canada, they have some companies, and I suppose elsewhere, where you can buy gold physical in Canada, and then you can withdraw the gold in another country.
Yes.
So that problem can be surmounted. And two, the gold can be taken away from you.
Yes.
Now, the Bitcoin people and the crypto guys, they tell you this cannot happen with Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies. Well, that may be true, but you can make it very expensive and painful for people that are caught with Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies trying to pay for something.
Once you try to use it, yes.
Once you declare something illegal, it's like if the government declares gold to be illegal, you can say, I don't give a S about it because my gold is in a safe deposit box. The problem is when you take the gold out physically from the safe deposit box and you bring it to cash in with a gold dealer, it has to be someone that operates on the black market, because once gold is illegal to own, the bank will not transfer the gold into cash for you because it's illegal.
Yeah.
So this becomes, and then the government can say, yeah, it's illegal, and the penalty is 20 years in jail. You know, they can be very strict.
Yes.
So the jails will be all full, but the government of the socialists, they will take out the really dangerous criminals who are in jail, the ones that are the murderers and so forth. They let them go and put in, you know, harmless white-collar criminals.
Yes. Well, they've confiscated gold in the past as well, so this isn't a new territory.
No,
it can happen.
It's nothing new.
Nothing
they
new.
Also confiscated real estate. They confiscated everything in the past.
Yes.
That's why, you know, large fortunes usually don't survive for very long. There are very few fortunes that survived over several hundred centuries.
Yes.
The same for countries. Not many countries survived for very long.
Well, that's the big talk now. Is this the fall of an empire? It's the big shift. Is this all coinciding together? Is it all kind of happening before our eyes? And even if I go down one path or another, I remind myself, what a fantastic time to be alive, because this is history happening at a very high rate, chaotic rate. But there are things happening now that are absolutely, if one can remove themselves from, shocking and stunning on a historical level.
Yeah, sure. This is a very interesting period in history. In the case of young people, I don't wish them socialism. I can tell you, this is the last thing I would wish for them. But they all say, well, it would be good if the government did this for us and did that for us. And nobody tells them actually that someone has to pay for all this. Today's economists go and tell them, it's free, don't worry.
We are heading down a very slippery path. And
yes.
I would love, and you've spent a lot of time with me today. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Faber, for helping to educate myself and others. And I want to encourage people to go look at the Gloom Boom Doom report by Dr. Faber. We'll have all this listed as well and links to it, because it's a treat to be able to get the amount of wisdom that you have, and to help guide us forward, especially when it's simply not happening otherwise. You have to go out and search for this information whenever it is readily available. It's out there. I mean, if you've got a bit of a curious mind, you can go find it.
Yes, that is the key.
Yes.
Especially when people come to me and says, what would you do? I think the key is to have a curious mind about everything. And I agree that there are lots of conspiracy theories that are wrong and exaggerated and are used for a political purpose and so forth. But equally, I think that there is a lot of information available through the internet that if you use it intelligently, you can increase your knowledge about any subject. The socialists, of course, don't want people with a curious mind. They want people that are confused and believe their BS.
I always liken it to the goal of a far extreme left socialist is to bring everyone down, everything down to a lower level so that everyone's equal, rather than the attempt even of we're going to try to raise people up, because that takes a lot more work. To support people, pushing them forward takes a lot more effort than, hey, let's take a step back and push everything down and dumb it down a bit.
Yes, I think America, to be fair, with all the criticism I have about America and the corruption that was always existent right from the start among politicians, the capitalistic system, as Milton Friedman explained, is the only system that has ever created a high standard of living for everybody. Still, as you said, the capitalistic system at least leads some people very high up and leads to everybody moving up a little bit. But under the socialist system, I guarantee you, everybody goes down a lot.
Yes.
And injustice develops.
Yes.
And corruption becomes much, much larger than under a capitalistic system.
Absolutely. And I can understand if I'm a millennial and I look at the rate of change and the speed of progress and innovation, that gap, that requires a level of intelligence. I mean, if you're going to get into quantum computing, if you're going to get into a lot of high end, like that, if you're a young student, you think, oh my God, this world is changing so fast. Do I even have the capabilities of hitting that? Like it's a tough time, but the flip side, the risk is you're going to be left behind. Like you have to start shifting with the rate of change or be forced to be left behind.
It was nice talking to you and to your listeners and viewers. I wish them all a nice weekend and a lot of success in their investments and especially good health. And hopefully we find a way to guide the politicians into the right direction and let them understand that these lockdowns are fairly useless, mostly useless, but it's a way to oppress the population. That has to be seen.
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faber. Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Click that like and subscribe button and go sign up on superchargedstocks.com and let's keep you notified.